Change is often born from the simplest moments, the subtlest shifts in our perception, or the realization that there is another way. It's as if a breeze whispers through our souls, gently nudging us to question the familiar and explore uncharted territories. These seemingly insignificant occurrences have the remarkable power to propel individuals to challenge conventions, break barriers, and reshape the world we know. At the heart of this transformation lies a fundamental realization. Change starts from within. It is an intimate journey that unfolds as we explore the depths of our own being. When we grasp this truth and make the conscious choice to initiate change, it begins to flow through our actions and behaviors. We ultimately discover that we have the capacity to be the change we wish to see in the world around us. And when enough of us make that choice, a coherent force emerges, something even bigger and more powerful than we could ever imagine. Yet amidst this awe-inspiring potential for change, it can feel overwhelming by the magnitude of reshaping the world. It's crucial to remember, however, that creating change isn't the exclusive domain of the intellectual elite or those positioned in higher power within society. Yet it is within the grasp of each and every one of us. That is the tremendous power we all possess, the power to manifest change that reverberates within our immediate spheres and ripples through the larger fabric of society. Today on this episode of Beyond the Transaction, we have the privilege of speaking with a guest who has harnessed this power and is helping Skyzer change the payments industry. Her vision of the journey serves as a beacon of inspiration, reminding us of the incredible impact a person or business can have when they dare to challenge the norm and redefine possibilities. Allow me to introduce our exceptional guest today, Karolina from Richards Partners. We met Karolina when the team came on board to rebrand Skyzer. She's a luminary in the world of design, possessing an extraordinary talent for incorporating creativity into the work she does, encouraging brands to stand out and be different. Karolina has honed her expertise in brand identity systems, working alongside design teams to orchestrate transformative journeys for businesses. Her visionary mindset allows her to seamlessly meld conceptual brilliance with practical sensibilities. In this episode, join us as we journey beyond the transaction, exploring the immense power of change and into the colorful world of marketing, branding, and customer experiences. Without further ado, I'm Katie Baldwin, and this is Beyond the Transaction, Sky's the Limit. Welcome, Karolina.
Hey, Katie. Thanks for having me.
Yeah,
what an introduction. I feel like I definitely can't wear all of those badges, but thank you for your kind words.
Yeah, we might have to print this out.
Yeah, I might need a copy of that afterwards, if that's okay.
Yeah, you're only ever to be introduced by this way.
As a visionary, that was my favorite
yeah.
part. No, thank you. It's lovely to be here and to hear all about what you've been doing at Skyzer as well, since we've worked on the project with you and your team.
I know, nearly a whole year ago, isn't that right?
Yeah.
It's crazy.
Time flies.
But I guess for sort of business, hearing about you.
So I suppose we're talking about sort of my trajectory to becoming a design director. I'll start with from a young age. I used to watch my mother do watercolor paintings, and I think that's where my sort of artistic craving began. I used to want to do paintings just as well as her. So that kind of went through with me in life, and I went to university and decided to do a Bachelor of Fine Arts, and I was painting there, sculpting, all of the above in terms of visual art, and at some point we had to major, and I decided to major in graphic design. So I guess what was good about graphic design was it was on a computer. And I will be the first to admit I'm not the best at drawing, despite where I started to have this passion. And what I loved about graphic design was this blend, for me, a blend of all different types of artistic disciplines. So you can incorporate painting, color, obviously design, photography, typography, and create things physically as well as things that are digital. So I just liked that flexibility that I experienced in graphic design. And from there I went to work at studios, and I've been, I think, 4 studios now. And Richards Partners has been, as you said, my home, and sometimes quite literally. I have spent an overnight there once.
Oh, no.
Yeah, it has been my home for the past almost, I guess, 5 or 6 years now, and it's been wonderful. Richards Partners is led by our founder, Brian Richards, who is the strategic mind behind Richards Partners and everything that we've done for brands across the years. So alongside great brands like Skyzer, he's worked on brands in his early days such as Fisher & Paykel and Icebreaker. And from then on, we've just kind of watched his business grow for the last 30 years. And here we are. And he's now got a team of us around him. And we've all been trained in this method, which is really about the marriage of strategy and then the output of a story, which then translates into what we call brand, which then obviously goes into what we call marketing. So anyway, that's sort of a journey that I've taken.
So when you left university, is this the projection that you thought you'd be on?
Yeah, it actually sort of is. I'd like to say it wasn't, but I guess I'm a planner.
Yeah.
And pretty much it's exactly where I thought it'd go, which is an interesting concept in itself. I think while I was at university, I was often told by my tutors that I was too safe in my designs.
Right.
And that I had to they wanted me to create things that were more unexpected in terms of the outcome. So they could see that I was already visualizing an outcome and able to kind of create a process that led me to that outcome. And with this encouragement forced me out of my comfort zone, which I'm very glad it did, because now I use it probably most days, where you kind of let things go a little bit and you watch. So you create parameters to work within, which is the beauty of creating brands and graphic design, but you need to have that, you need to allow things to take their own shape. Yeah, I still remember growing a typeface out of grass seed, and not being able to obviously control anything except for a grid, which was made out of weed mat that kind of allowed the letters to grow within the space. And yet essentially I found some pretty interesting discoveries doing that. I was able to create a lightweight, a medium weight, and then a bold weight purely by, and an italicized version actually, purely by how much light the letters were getting. So more light, more bold, more growth, right? And then light from an angle, all of the grass leant to one side and you had an italicized version. So anyway, that was a little
incredible. I love it. I love that, just that pocket.
Go.
Yeah, that pocket of story kind of also shows your approach that obviously still rings true today, where, you know, you're thinking about all the logistics of everything to make something that is kind of, you know, it is out of your control, but it's really a creative output.
Yeah, I'd say that, like, I guess in terms of artistic sensibilities, graphic design is one of those forms of art that you actually don't create for yourself ever. You purely create for others and with others. So branding is this collaborative approach where you create with a client or a person that you're designing for. You're creating for an audience to look at, so there's another party involved, obviously. And once you've created it, you sort of give it away and let it go, right? So, and more art is created thereafter under the guise of that original idea. So that's something I've always thought about as an interesting aspect of, I guess, graphic design in the branding industry.
Yeah, definitely. I would say that's a universal truth in creatives, right? Just like anyone, you have your own passion, which is creating this art, and you see it in this way. But at the end of the day, we, especially in your position, you need to create something that the brand or the stakeholder is really looking for. So sometimes you have to make some compromises, knowing they might not be the right choice. But at the end of the day, you have to let go. And you have to, like, embrace that. And as you said, when you do let it go, when you've done all the work you can, you get to see it live. And that's great that that sounds like it inspires you.
Yeah, no, definitely. I think I've always wanted to help people, like at the base of it. So I think being able to help people bring, especially when you have smaller businesses that you're working with, help bring their idea to life and help get their products and their sort of, I guess, inspiration in front of other people. I think that's probably one of the things I get the most joy from is that interaction and that actual meaningful difference that you can make, hopefully, in terms of, as much as you can do with graphic design, which is a lot, I might add.
But it all sounds like it's all marrying to something great, where you have to be flexible for your client and make something that they really want, and bring their vision to life, essentially, because people come to you with words.
Sometimes not even words.
They don't even know what they want.
They usually come and they know what they don't want, though, which is always helpful.
Yeah, a starting point, you could say.
Point.
Yeah. But that kind of brings us to Skyzer's rebranding.
Yes.
A whole year ago.
Yes.
I'd love to hear from your words where you started, how it went.
Yes. I will credit people that worked on that project with me. Skyzer brand and strategy was designed and written by Brian Richards and Briar Taylor. And I was there too as design director. And we worked together as a team actually over lockdown primarily, where we were really having some engaging conversations with Mike and the team at Skyzer about what do we have here? We have this product. I'm holding it now for those that can't see.
For those of you at home.
I'm holding the bright pink version of the Skyzer terminal, and we just thought, wow, this is challenging the everyday object. And that is, I've always had a fascination with this idea of us passively using everyday objects and not even noticing them, and how much of a sort of significant part they actually play in our lives. Like if you have a light switch at home that is positioned in the wrong place, you always miss it. If you've got a kettle that's broken, but not quite fully broken, you're probably kind of cursing yourself every day as you use it. So I feel like objects and everyday objects really have a bigger part to play in our lives than people realize. And so when Skyzer came to us, we saw this challenge on what's considered an everyday object. You can probably think back to your last week, and you won't remember how many terminals that you've used, but you're using them with a lot of seriousness. This is your purchase. It's a transaction, as you mentioned earlier. And we wanted to kind of take the ethos of this idea of changing that and challenging something that's so overlooked and bringing it to the forefront of really good experience and really good design. And so we got excited about things like, obviously, color, because Skyzer's main differentiator, of course, is the color palette and the customizability, but also the beauty of the object. So what people don't really often talk about is how beauty is function. And that was a key part of the strategy and the thinking behind Skyzer, was beauty actually inspires us to interact with something. And from, over years and years, since the beginning of time, we've been making choices based on beauty, on things being aesthetically pleasing. And primitively, it's innate in our being, because we're drawn to things that are going to keep us safe, and ugly things, scary looking things, usually not going to keep us safe. And so beauty has been part of our sort of, I guess, psyche since the beginning of our existence.
Definitely.
And if you look back at some of the earliest tools that were created by cavemen, they were all created perfectly symmetrical, and there was no reason for it other than they wanted things to line up, to feel right, to look beautiful in the hand, to be pleasant to use. So there's this whole kind of idea that it's beauty versus function. But really, when you think about it a bit deeper, it's actually they're married together. Beauty is function, and great function is beautiful. Some of the most beautiful things are mathematical equations that have the most perfect formulas. And when you look at them, they have this elegance and this beauty about them. So anyway, coming back to Skyzer, we thought, how can we take an everyday object and redefine what it means to use it, and capture audiences in that part of their purchasing process. So brand is experience, and often people will think of a shopping experience and they'll think of how maybe it's retail environment, how the hangers felt, whether they had enough space to view the clothing, let's say, if it's a clothing retail store, what the changing room was like, was there a hook, was there a seat, did the curtain have a little bit of a gap in it, you couldn't fully feel like you were in your privacy. And then how did it feel going up to the checkouts? Was there a line? Was there something to do while you waited? Did everything feel clean? Was it smooth? Did you get asked a lot of questions? And finally, what was the payment experience like? And what people don't realize is when they walk out of a store and they've just bought something, maybe quite expensive, and they want to feel really good. What people don't realize is it's that whole process that goes from upon entering the store to payment to leaving that actually influences how they feel at the end of it. And of course, it's the customer service alongside it, but really the idea of everything being taken care of and every detail being noticed in that experience is what we thought of with Skyzer.
And I think to your point there, it is that subconscious where we don't really consciously know that we're thinking of it, but when you leave that store and you're thinking about your purchase, you will calculate all this under your brain and come out with an output. And I think as unfortunate as it is that you notice when it's lacking the most.
Yeah.
We all kind of come to that level of expecting a smooth transition. And when the pay wave declines or you can't find where it goes, that equates as a negative interaction that sticks out so much more than if everything went smoothly, and because that's what you expect. So those outliers really hit a nerve and kind of encapsulate the whole experience. I'm also curious to know, you said how before even Skyzer came on board, you were already interested in this functional objects and thinking on a different level than most people take for granted.
Yeah.
Is that just something in the season, or was there something that really triggered it for you to kind of get into that realm?
There wasn't a documentary I watched not long ago called Objectified. Well, actually, it was probably quite long ago. Time is flying. I think it probably came out in the 90s, in all honesty. But it was essentially talking about everyday objects and how everything around us is designed, which is a concept that all designers are familiar with. And I remember falling in love with I think it was Andrew Blofeld, who was one of the guests on this documentary. He was talking about a chopstick. No, sorry. He was talking about a toothpick, a Japanese toothpick that was designed so that you could snip the end off and you'd have a little toothpick rest to rest your toothpick on after you'd used it, so you wouldn't get the table contaminated or dirty. And I guess it was that thoughtfulness and the fact that millions of people probably use these toothpicks with the little snippy bit off the end and don't even realize that that's why the original designer put it there. So I guess I've always had an interest in objects and things, just because I think they're so much more part of our lives than we give them credit for. So in the case of beautiful technology, you've got Apple products, Dyson, or even like functional objects that are purely, a vessel to hold a glass of water, as we have here on the table. So I think challenging that passive use and being able to have more of an active appreciation for everyday objects was something I kind of early on, especially in my studies, I paid attention to. And I think we've all heard that saying that's the best design is invisible.
Exactly.
And that sort of speaks to your point earlier about how we notice when it's missing or when it's faulty. That's when it comes into our heads. But otherwise, we kind of, like, life just happens because we have these well-designed objects that are seamless to use. And, yeah. And coming back to that point on the store experience, it's all about those unsolicited extras that you get, right? So you've probably been to a store where you're just like, oh, everything's so nice. And then they take out their branded, coloured FPOS terminal for your payment. And you're just, it's just those details. It's those things you don't expect that, really stay with people and are actually so much more a part of branding than people realise. A lot of people come to us and will think that brand lives in a logo or purely in colours, but it really is. I mean, I could go on about this, so I'll probably stop myself there, but I always say that brand is actually a feeling, and it's the feeling you get from interacting with something.
Spot on. perfectly. And it's all these extracurriculars, or I guess you could call them, like the color and the logo. Those are just all a part of the brand. It's just all little touch points that feed right back into it. I love when you describe that perfect scenario, right? The perfect store experience. And then they pull out this terminal, right? And it's so unexpected and it's so pretty and it's so well to that brand that it elevates it to a whole new thing because it's such a surprise. And that's all about the whole theme of changing. Like when you do challenge the norms and the expected, you really can come out with something that speaks volume for your brand more than what you would just the normal checklist of logo, story, about us.
Yeah. I mean, the brands that are getting it really right, so your favorite brands are doing all these extra things that you're not noticing. They're invisible, essentially. And in terms of like the transaction, we've all been there where someone's taken out an EFTPOS machine for you to pay and they need to replace the paper roll, or the Wi-Fi is not connecting, or, you know, you have to like insert your card a few times or swipe it and turn it around a few times to get the thing to work. So yeah, it's an interesting concept that something so simple and beautiful can really change your whole experience of a brand, not just a store, but the brand behind it.
And I mean, we've touched on it, but the power of color.
The power of color.
The power of color. We've all lived this life of just black, maybe white every now and then, terminals, but they're usually black and gray and crusty, I like to call them.
Yeah.
And for Skyzer to, you know, take this leap into color, it seems almost like, why wouldn't there be color, right? It's such an easy concept to get around. But I love the work you guys did with color. It's more than, you know, it just keeps adding to the story of beauty and functionality being intertwined in one rather than either or vice versa. And yeah, any input on the power of color in your eyes? I mean, being a designer, I would assume this is your bread and butter.
Heavy. No, obviously, color is such an integral part of the way we feel and the way an environment feels and an object feels. And you're right, it seems almost like the most obvious idea. Why don't we assign color to EFTPOS terminals? Apple did it with their Apple Macintosh computers. They've recently done it again. And color is one of those things that we take really for granted these days. And I think it's because the availability of color to us is just we have all the options in the world. We don't have to make color. We don't have to, you know, work hard to find color. I've been interested obviously in the histories of color and how each color has meant something really important during different points in time. Obviously the cavemen started with the painting on the walls with red earth, and they had this rich ochre color that came directly naturally from the earth. And then over time you have other colors pop up throughout history. Maroon is an interesting one because that was one of the first synthetically made colors.
Right.
Yeah. And it was actually discovered by accident. A chemist was working on mixing different materials, and he came across making this color mauve and dipped some fabric in the liquid and got obviously the fabric became mauve in color. And I think Queen Victoria was one of the first people that wore this color. And so color used to be a lot harder to get your hands on. It used to be something you had to manufacture. I think it was the Egyptians that loved light blue, and they used to essentially have to create this light blue color because for them it symbolized so many great things in their culture: water, the sky. But they couldn't make it for eons. And they finally found this method where they actually mixed sand with another material. I can't remember the other material. Great storytelling, Karolina. But just imagine it's something like glass or some other natural compound. And they mixed them together and sort of heated them at all these various different temperatures to make this color blue. And it was, I think we take color for granted because it's mass produced.
Yeah.
But it's something actually very innate in our being to appreciate. So in terms of Skyzer and the color availability of this EPOS product, we loved the fact that you could actually custom make any color you wanted. And that meant so much to the branding process for us as well, because we didn't have to stick with a set of colors for this brand. This brand was all colors, as long as there was a lot of color, because it was the point of difference. And I think that was part of the process being so sort of rewarding for us, was being able to use color to create different environments. For a lot of the photography for Skyzer, we sort of thought about surrealism a little bit as well, because it was about this challenge of the expected. So you're kind of challenging what's the norm. And so creating these mini environments where, you know, you might have like a retail store or a restaurant, but having something kind of peculiar in the shot and having the colors kind of make it feel like a little bit surreal and otherworldly. Those concepts really, we loved them. But the most important thing is that they spoke to this idea of creativity and imagination, and how many people who might gravitate towards having a custom product like this in their store are actually going to be focused on something that they're passionate about and bringing a vision to life. And so being sort of, I guess, implementing within this process, we thought, what a lovely concept to be able to exercise and bring to life. Through color and imagination.
No, I love that, Caroline, because I inherited your work, essentially, is what you could say.
I'm sorry.
No, not at all.
No, it's actually such beautiful work, though.
Definitely. Yeah. And I don't think I would be here if I didn't
you
inherit that
work. You might not have been convinced.
Yeah, exactly. All the bright colors.
Yeah.
And I think that it goes back to the first point. I mean, it's all interconnected, but just to logically kind of approach it, is FPOS terminals have always led with functionality. Even though there is some sort of beauty to it, the sleek lines, someone's thought about this to some degree, whether it be a second thought or whatever. But bringing color, almost, it exceeds the functionality too. So it becomes also an object that can sit on the countertop, and it reinforces the brand. It's having this dual asset. Of course, it still takes payment, still very functional, but it almost leads with the color now, which is so great. And I think the way you guys shot it and everything, you talked about the surrealism, right? It is a bit funky, I guess. You've never seen an FPOS terminal look like this before.
It's supposed to stop you in your tracks.
Exactly, especially the scene you guys set. But you also have models and humans in there, which kind of go back to that grounding of it's functional too. It's not only just a prop in this photo shoot. There is some real functionality to it, and it's balancing those two.
Yeah.
Sometimes people pose them as polar opposites, but as we just discussed, it's more of an intertwined combination thing moving forward.
I mean, beauty is function. Beauty makes our lives easier. I'd say, even from the simple idea of having this FPOS terminal on your counter and not having to hide it, It's not like you're going to put it away at the end of the day. You're probably actually going to dust the counter and dust the terminal too, because it's a nice object. You want to have it around. I guess as well, in terms of beauty and function, you've got this idea of payment. There is something in the process of paying for something, and I mean, it's probably quite obvious, but where you want a lack of security, trust, and safety to come into that experience, right? So for us, we thought a lot about how we represent color, but there's a seriousness and a sort of affirming quality to the brand too, because we don't want people to feel like, I don't know, like I'm trying to imagine something that you wouldn't trust in the form of an FPOS machine. Maybe it's that earlier example of the paper roll falling out and it doesn't quite work, and the digital screen's half broken, and I don't know, etc. And maybe you've put a payment through and it's said accepted, but the person on the other end is saying it's declined. So anyway, so when I'm thinking about how we thought about the creation of the Skyzer brand, we wanted this air of safety,
Yeah, trusting.
Trust. And so we looked to metaphors that would represent that concept. And one of those metaphors was this beautiful method of an owl. And now the brand name Skyzer was already in play when your team visited us. And so we wanted something that related in some form to Skyzer and felt like it would capture the ethos of the brand well, in terms of being safe, wise, trustworthy, quiet, smooth, slick, elegant, all those keywords. And so the owl feature, the owl symbol that we created for Skyzer, was meant to talk to all those qualities and be a subtle stamp that kind of let people know, hey, this is one of those Skyzer machines. It's safe. It's got this subtle outline of an owl. And we even thought about this payment process, pay wave, or these days with your watch, paying, the swift movement of just being able to flutter your wings and make a payment, we thought kind of related to the idea of an owl. But yeah, coming back to my point, it's about color, but we needed that seriousness. So having something like an owl, we thought that would bring in, that level of safety.
And I mean, if we want to even think more about the owl, like, I guess everyone has their perceptions of what an owl means to them.
Of course.
But like, I think of them as almost top of the food chain for birds.
Oh, there we go.
Right?
Yeah.
So they're kind of this, as you said, wise at the top. They're a very authoritative figure almost in the animal kingdom.
Yeah.
And one other thing I'd love to say about the logo is the bird is what I always tell people when I'm getting things branded.
Yeah.
The bird, it's like the lines. Also, I see the symmetry with actually the machine as well. It's very a clean design, and it rounds and it moves. So kudos to you, essentially. But I think it's important to put a voice behind these decisions. And then also me, who did not make any decisions, but I use this logo and this brand on the daily and what that kind of interprets from an outsider point of view. Yeah. And then creating even this podcast and adding Skyzer's the limit. It was a bit of a play on words, obviously, being sky's the limit. But it all intertwines wonderfully.
Yeah, it does.
Thank you for the bird.
Yeah, no, the bird works.
The bird
we love the bird.
Yeah. Is there any other point that you want to discuss about the work you guys did?
I think it just goes back to those point about unsolicited extras. So really thinking about brand as an experience and a feeling rather than just specific things that you do, meaning it doesn't live in your strategy document or in your logo or on your website. It really is everything that your brand is. So if you think about it from the aspect of, from a cultural perspective, what is the company culture like? What are the people that represent your brand like as people? Do they represent the right values that align with the brand? Thinking about brand also from that point of view of your customers, like what audience groups do they live in? They are actually your brand too. They take part in advocating for your brand, or maybe not advocating for. Obviously, I'm not talking about Skyzer. I'm talking about brands in general. Yeah. And then thinking about how brand, because it's so much about all those interactions, and they're micro interactions that you have every day with different brands. It's those extras, or it's when you exceed someone's expectations that you immediately gravitate towards a brand, because you make a connection. And at the end of the day, it is about a human connecting with a human on the other side, even if there is a product in the middle. So I'd just say probably I'd add that with Skyzer, we felt that we were creating something that could really not only obviously work for the brand Skyzer, but it was almost like we were creating a brand for brands and allowing for other brands to use this branded product for their brands and be able to customize that to express their vision or their dream for their business. And there was something about that was very exciting. We were speaking to people who had their own brands and their own dreams.
It's great you bring that up, because this was something I grappled with a lot in my first 6 months working at Skyzer. It's such a niche product almost.
Hell yeah.
But as you said, as you described it first off the bat, it's an everyday object. Whether you are a business owner or you're not.
It's niche, but then it's also
applicable
not
to
niche.
Yeah, exactly.
Literally,
it's very ironic.
Like, we touch it all the time. We have this all the time in front of us.
And we all know what that is.
Yeah.
There's no real English on it. I mean, there is when you're purchasing, but everybody knows what that is just by looking at it.
Yeah. It's like a kettle or a toilet button. Don't know why that came to mind.
You change it to a button.
A toilet button.
But yeah, I to that point also, it's, one of my favorite parts of working with this brand in Skyzer is that the best thing I can see as success is when we get a color in store. We're not making a huge profit. It's not about that. It's about seeing them in use, hearing the feedback that we get, unsolicited, of course, as well, of customers and business owners alike, just being so impressed with the color, in love with, being able to add their own logo to it. It makes all the difference for something that has gone overlooked for so long. Can only thank your genius to bringing it to life and me inheriting it and continuing passing the torch and trying to burn the city down. I don't know.
No. You've done such. I must say, I'm stoked in seeing everything that's come out on the Instagram for Skyzer and all the social media, and the fact that you're doing a podcast as well.
Yeah, why not?
Yeah,
I think you're cooler than just the FPOS terminal, right?
Exactly. You've got so much going on.
So, Caroline, when I say creative business,
had a good prompt.
Yeah, no, it's good. What do you think of when you hear creative business?
It's funny, as I just heard Dan's answer earlier, so
yeah, I know.
I'm trying to get that out of my head.
Shake it out.
I mean, immediately I think of people who have, like a creative element to what they're doing. And I do think most people are creatives, contrary to what some other people might say. So when I think of a creative business, I think of a business that's pushing boundaries. It's about innovation, doing something different, change, improvement, and just kind of challenging the norm and shaking things up a bit.
Yeah, I do like that, and especially your first point about how everybody is a creative. It's just whether they tap into it or not, or have the conviction to see it through.
We've all seen that like outdated diagram of like left brain, right brain, like creatives. I kind of subscribe to the belief that everyone's using obviously their whole brain.
Imagine,
but everyone's got a creative aspect to what they do, and whether that's something mechanical or something completely organic, I think creativity is really more about the ideas and the approach than it is about the outcome or the output as well.
And I like that you say that as well, because I feel like the word creative or creativity really is put on this pedestal. Like, I could never consider myself a creative. That's, a rare breed.
Yeah.
When really it is in each of us. And it's, I guess, making that conscious decision to use it.
Yeah.
In whatever way that, floats your boat, I guess.
Yeah.
I'll move on to your sources of inspiration.
I thought about this one. I like to say I'm obviously inspired by my surroundings.
Yeah.
So I often will take a walk at my lunchtime or after work and be inspired by what I see around me. So that's obviously could be man-made, it could be natural, organic, it could be physical, it could be a smell or a sound. So I try and take inspiration from my direct environment. Of course, a portion of my inspiration I might see on a digital screen, being able to look at what's going on overseas and what, technological developments there are. AI has been a particular interest of mine lately, but also interest in health and science. And at the end of the day, the reason I do what I do is I'm trying to basically find all these nuggets of creativity in every discipline that I come across. And we work with so many clients from different businesses and backgrounds, and there's something to be learned from all of them. I can speak to one creative inspiration that I have, which is actually in the world of fashion. So he's recently passed away, but we all know Issey Miyake. And the reason I bring him up is because he originally studied graphic design and obviously went on to kind of live in the world of fashion, although he preferred the term clothing. And his work was very colourful, inspired by form and function, as well as had these wonderful sculptural qualities that he used. He worked with fabric and manipulated it to create the most beautiful pieces, I would call them, not just pieces of clothing. And
Right.
what I love about, I guess, his way of working was that idea of challenging what you're doing every day and challenging the methods that you're doing them in, maybe still having an output that is recognizable, but bringing just anything into it. So you might so he was taking like using paper in between his pleats and creating these structural qualities in his clothes that kind of echoed like a rubber bouncy ball, or,
Right,
just crazy inspiration from everywhere. And I think that's where the magic happens, is when you're using alternative materials and challenging what you're doing to create something new. So he's probably an inspiration of mine.
Yeah, and it kind of, it seems like that's a long
Not
term.
probably is, but yeah. Probably.
Yeah. Well, it seems like it's a long-term
Yeah.
inspiration too. Like,
Yeah. No, he's great. He's friends with Steve Jobs as well, and designed his turtleneck,
oh yeah.
which is the story
As I'm
that,
wearing.
we're both in like a black turtleneck now. I'm like, how fitting. But yeah.
We talked about color, of course.
Yeah.
If there's anything more you want to go into that, the power of the consumer journey, which you've definitely talked about already. Is there anything you would change though? Like, would you change the consumer and the way they think, or do you think it's kind of left on the business owner or whoever's looking after the brand owner and how they're creating it? What needs to change essentially, do you think?
I think everyone needs to get more honest. And I think we're getting there. I love reading on the back of a product, on the back of packaging, let's say FMCG supermarket good, and reading the story of how that product came to be, who's behind it, where was it grown. I've even recently seen some products talk about pricing and say, like, this has to cost a little bit more because we're actually doing it the sustainable way,
Right.
whatever that may be. And yeah, I think essentially as consumers and as brand owners, we all need to get more honest, and stop trying to trick people into doing anything, and start telling the truth and letting products and services speak for themselves. That's probably
I love
biggest
that.
thing.
Yeah, authenticity.
Yeah.
Because it speaks volume, if we're more honest, then everything flows through. And if you're not being honest, then
then why are you even
why you
doing
exist?
it? Yeah. Like I love anyone who's passionate about something, and I think when you get a product, you kind of know if the brand and the people behind it were passionate or if they're just churning something to make profit. And I guess the honesty and the authenticity behind what it is they're doing comes through. And if they're waking up in the morning, they love what they're doing, they believe in something, you're going to get a great piece of product or a great service. And so honesty, I guess, with yourself about what it is you're passionate about too, will lead to better things and change.
The whole world is in a net positive, right? You're producing something that's authentic to you. You feel good.
Yeah.
You're waking up every day happy.
Yeah. We hope so.
Yeah. Discretion is advised. And if you have anything to plug, personally or professionally,
yeah. What do I plug?
you want people to
I'm
follow
so
you
not a
at
plugger.
Caroline's Mood.
Oh, you can definitely follow me on Instagram if you guys want. Caroline's_mood. I also work for Richard's Partners, and I guess what we do there is strategy and design. And our mission is to find what your story is and help you tell it and work collaboratively. Thank you for having me on this podcast.
Thank you, Caroline, for coming in, sharing your experiences and the conversation. So good to hear from New Zealand creatives on the ground contributing to the modern Kiwi culture in any way. And of course, thank you all for listening. You know what to do. Check out the Skies Are Social pages if you have any suggestions or comments to share. And we'll be back next time to discuss more about the creative people and businesses shaping Aotearoa. I'm Katie Baldwin, and this was an episode of Beyond the Transaction. Thanks again, everyone, for listening. Toodaloo. See ya.
Bye.
Bye.
It's primitive years since. What should I say? I should word this better. So you're going to cut this, Katie, when you hear this later.
You're like, cut.
Since the beginning of time. No.